In my first video of this series, I announced my candidacy for the office of unarmed constable in my district, along with my intention to carry this concept into the troubled neighborhoods across the land with the support of a model legislation to enable the concept in their many districts. Since the Democratic Party has already shown its contempt for this plan in 2016, favoring the celebration of those tragic shooting deaths that serve to rally the press, rally the crowds, and perhaps rally the vote, it will be necessary for those troubled peoples to swing their votes to the alternate party in order to avail themselves of the concept. In doing so, by making that swing, those people can very likely establish themselves as the swing vote in subsequent elections. That will give them tremendous bargaining power in every campaign cycle. But first, they must make that swing in order to realize that potential. The promise of establishing safety and security in their troubled neighborhoods with unarmed constables is probably the best opportunity and the best reason they will ever have to vote that swing. So I am optimistic that our enemies will be swept out of office in 2020. With solid majorities in both the Senate and the House, President Trump will be able to keep his promises, and our troubled minorities will be on their way to a bright future. But our political conflicts are the evidence, the symptoms, of a much deeper philosophical conflict, a conflict of fundamental values, a conflict of sweeping goals and ambitions. At the root of this great division which our country suffers, there is a dialectic between our traditional values and secular humanism. We've all heard that term, secular humanism, but we haven't been told very much about it. So, here's what secular humanism is. 100 years ago, during World War I, the great scientific thinkers were appalled by the rivers of blood flowing out of the French forest. This was the blood of every race, every nation, because World War I was a war of global empires. So they turned their attention away from their studies of electricity and taxonomy and internal combustion engines and focused for a time on the plight of humanity. They figured out that we form hierarchies of all kinds, and these hierarchies are like pyramids with people climbing to the top. But there is less and less room near the top, and the people at the top can get worried. So these pyramids, these hierarchies, have to grow to make more room for the people. And as they do, they bump into each other, and this creates huge conflicts. The solution to this problem is to get the whole world into one single pyramid, one great global hierarchy, and then build a firewall to protect the people near the top from the rest of the people. Of course, nobody knew exactly how to do that, but a lot of people came up with different ideas. It was evident that whoever could do this first would have the upper hand over everyone else for a long, long time. And so the race began for the whole world, in earnest, with scholarly moral support. Secular humanist societies were formed in many countries, holding conferences and publishing journals. Many different sets of tenets or principles were published, and eventually the thing called game theory lent a new character to this movement. Game theory holds that the player with the most options should win. It follows, then, that if a player will divest himself of all moral restraints, he will have more options, and so he should stand a better chance of winning. Quickly, secular humanism began to attract those players who were willing to set aside all of their morals. Decency and kindness and mercy and generosity were filtered out of the secular humanist societies. The secular humanists began to include only those who chose to be ruthless, vicious, and merciless. In a word, bully. And so we saw the Bolshevist movement among the communists in Russia. We saw Nazism and fascism in Western Europe. We saw the brutality of the shoguns in Japan, and later that of Chairman Mao in China. Lately, we saw the Cultural Revolution in our own country with its drugs, crimes, immorality, and rising suicide rate. Around the world, secular humanism continues to inspire the most vulgar and vicious behaviors, including those of the self-proclaimed Muslims, who pervert the philosophy and teachings of their own prophet. Clearly, secular humanism is a powerful philosophy of governance, They are playing for the whole world, for all the marbles, and they are playing more and more desperately because we, 7 billion of us, are slowly destroying their planet. They are afraid of us because we are consuming everything that they hope to completely own. So they will always find ways to rage against us unless we find something to offer them that is better than secular humanism. Realize, if you will, that all of the big secular humanist movements I just mentioned have failed. The fact is, most people would rather be good and live in peace and harmony. Most people don't want vast wealth and power, don't want to hurt anybody, don't rage against each other. So, if we can devise something that offers a reasonable hope of working, that will promise a stable society and command of a sustainable planet, we can expect it to be very popular. We can even expect the secular humanists to join us in pursuit of it. I think that we can do that. One of the hallmarks of secular humanism is its disdain for religion. When they attempt to reduce the rest of us to animal behavior, so that we can be managed as livestock, religion gets in the way. Religion makes us better than animals. Religion is pervasive, taking many forms in many cultures. And religion is resilient, resisting the onslaughts of one persecution after another. Religion acknowledges the reality of God in one way or another. And what the secular humanists fail to recognize, because they deny the reality of God, because they refuse to believe, is that God has all the options. And God is the most skillful player, too. And God has every intention of winning the whole world. God was in this game before we ever knew what this world was. God invented this game. And over the centuries, with tremendous patience and cunning, God has been steadily winning. So our best bet to meet the challenge of secular humanism and to make peace with our enemies is what I call faith-based humanics. This won't force religion on anyone. That is a necessary principle of faith-based humanics. We will need to recognize the right of every person to choose, and religious faith is the most consequential choice available to each person. There are other choices that are also of profound consequence, and we must also recognize those choices. At the same time, we can insist that each person is responsible for their choices. That is the fundamental method of faith-based humanics. We will be concerned with choices and responsibilities. As the secular humanists begin to see how this works, they will be pleased to pursue their goals by participating in their own way. There will be a dialectic, that instance of cross purposes, a contest of influences, but that's okay. This hasn't been introduced before because certain other movements had to have time to mature, and we will need to get our act together in this matter of religion. But now the time is ripe. I'm going to leave this explanation for later because right now the 2020 campaign season is before us. An introduction to faith-based humanics is suggested in this little book I've written, 1983, The Teflon Tales. But right now it is better for you to read about this in the privacy of your home. As more and more people become familiar with the issues, and as other agencies become prepared to advance the program, it will be much easier for us all to deal with it. A lot of very responsible people will need to change their perspectives in order to proceed with their routines. Sometimes the obvious truth is not what we're ready to handle. It will take a little time before we can handle the truth. Yes, faith-based humanics will deal with a lot of profound truth, and choices, and responsibilities. So let's take our time and get ready for it.